really a major green transformation of not only society, but also of economy and of the job market that we're looking into within the next 10 to 15 years. And we hope that this will be in a partnership with the US and basically other countries around the world, because this transformation that we're going through, we can leave no one behind. As a part of this push, I was charged with putting together a global climate strategy called A Green and Sustainable World. Happy to send it to all of you, or you can look it up on the Foreign Ministry's website. And in this strategy, we are moving ahead also at a global level to push energy transition to its max, either as Denmark in our bilateral cooperation with 16 countries on energy transition, through the European Union in Europe, or on a UN platform worldwide. We're also a very active member of the Powering Past Coal Alliance that aims to phase out coal completely globally by 2040. And we are working now on a new project, a new initiative to phase out oil and gas that's based on our North Sea decision. So we are really utilizing all tools in the toolbox to plow ahead. And the Danish government has said to us in the Foreign Service, our national efforts only make sense if you create global leverage out of it. As part of the push, we have also brought in the Danish private sector. 13 public-private partnerships with each strand of the private sector that are sort of looking at what it takes for the private sector to be part of the push for 70%, but then also for how to take those sectoral approaches to a global stage. And I know that several of them are looking for partners in the US, in Europe, and worldwide. This could be on shipping, it could be on cement, it could be on plastics, energy, much wider. We think that the textile industry should be part of that push, since, as you said, Joel, there are maybe 10% of global emissions coming from textile, and 70 to 80% of those are related to the production phase. And we think that a partnership throughout the value and supply chain for trade and textile could be really beneficial. The Danish partnership here has discussed the possibilities of creating economic incentives that would encourage the importance of sustainable and certifiable textiles through trade agreements, for example. This would, for us, need to be done at an EU level. Another Danish initiative relevant for the discussion today is the newly established task force for defining and promoting a sustainable transformation and an increased export of sustainable Danish fashion and textiles. We already mentioned that the textile industry accounts for about 10% of global emissions, but it also accounts for 20% of world's wastewater. So there's a lot to be done for this industry to live up to the targets, both on carbon emissions and on water treatment. A variety of Danish companies like Novozymes, Grundfos, Danfoss have developed outstanding innovative solutions which ensure more sustainable production in textiles. However, even though the solutions towards the sustainable production have been developed, they will need to be implemented at a much larger scale in order to achieve the long-term goal. And one challenge that many factories face, especially now due to the tremendous economic impact of COVID, is the lack of financial resources to purchase new technology and equipment. So a key part of Denmark's strategy for global climate action involves turning global financial flows in a green direction. It's therefore of great interest to Denmark to explore financial tools and new business models that may support the textile industry and its producers towards achieving our common goal of a more sustainable future. Moving towards this goal requires all stakeholders in the supply chain to take action. It is imperative that we act together and lift this agenda to an extent that will have significant impact in reducing the CO2 emissions. So in conclusion, I hope that this event will help clarify the challenges faced by the industry and contribute to forge a path forward. Thank you very much, Joel.
Tomas, thank you. And thank you again for the way in which you've just demonstrated how the domestic goals of Denmark translate into global success in the fight against climate change. I think it's a perfect example of how what had previously been a kind of production consumption duality actually becomes a connected strategy for global change. So thank you so much for that. It is my pleasure now to turn us to our panel for today. We have four extraordinary guests with us representing the World Bank, P4G, OVS, and Novozymes. And I will introduce each of them very briefly right before they make a short presentation. And the objective is then to engage in conversation both with the audience and with each of them. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Tuian Nguyen, who will speak first. He is the International Finance Corporation's portion of the World Bank Group. He is the Asian regional leader for manufacturing advisory based in Hanoi, Vietnam. He was previously with the IFC's resident representative for Mongolia and the head of office for Ho Chi Minh City. Today, he is joining us from Vietnam. Tuyen?
Hey everyone, thank you very much. Many thanks to Denmark for inviting IFC. It's quite actually a special privilege to do it even virtually via Parsons. One of my uncles, I think, was the first Vietnamese American refugee who attended Parsons in the mid-'80s. So it's quite an honor. So good morning, everyone. My name is Tuian Nguyen. IFC is the private sector arm of the World Bank. So the World Bank, essentially, the mission is to eradicate extreme poverty and to boost prosperity. And more as we're going through various crises and looking forward at the big potential climate crises, climate and poverty are very much interlinked in terms of the solutions. So next slide, please. So I just want to share, as an intro, the type of work that we're working in, and especially with the theme of build back better, right? Now we're looking at COVID and how we can build back better from COVID. But maybe actually a very good example near 10 years ago was in Bangladesh. 2013 was the devastating Rana Plaza accident where hundreds and thousands of people were killed and injured because of live fire safety in a garment factory. Now, many of the international brands were ready to pull out, but then there was commitment to build back better for Bangladesh. So there were programs on labor with ILO, Better Work, that IFC did a joint venture with, and then this partnership for cleaner textile, which we came in and try to not only work on the social issue, but focus on the forward-looking environmental issue in saving energy, water, wastewater, and bringing more financing. So it's very timely that we have this presentation today. And the PAC program, the first phase was supported by also Australia, Netherlands, but importantly also Denmark. So this is a great collaboration between IFC and Denmark. And now Bangladesh is still the number 2 or number 3 global garment exporter. And I think post-COVID, we can use example like this to really show the possibility of building back better, and hopefully not having to wait for a huge crisis in order to motivate us, because COVID is just a precursor for a much larger crisis, which is climate, if we do not address it today. So thank you very much, and looking forward to being on the panel today.
So I'm just going to say somebody had to do it. I was still on mute. I've now gotten it out of the way for the whole panel, so that won't happen. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Leila Surratt, Director of Strategy Engagement at P4G. Leila leads Strategy and Engagement for P4G, the Partnership for Green Growth and Global Goals 2030 initiative. She is joining us from Copenhagen, I think, today. Is that where you are today, Leila?
I wish I were in Copenhagen.
Where are you today?
I'm in Washington, D.C.
Oh, Washington. Okay. I had a list of cities we were coming from, and I forgot to put Washington on it. So we're live from Washington.
right down the Amtrak rails from you. So thank you so much, Ambassador Basse, Ambassador Christensen, Joel, for this opportunity to share some concrete examples of the work that our program is doing to support and accelerate sustainability in the textile sector. P4G, Partnering for Green Growth and Global Goals, is a global platform where the foundation really is that no one actor can do it alone. So we need the coalition of partner countries, of the private sector, of financiers, and civil society to really move forward. And we support partnerships on the ground in specific countries, helping them to scale, and then seeing how those models can be scaled globally. And IFC is a partner organization for P4G. So it was nice to hear more about the PACT program. And in fact, PACT is part of one of our projects in Bangladesh. I'd like to share with you, let's see, how do I get to the next slide? Okay. I'd like to share with you two of the projects that we're supporting in Bangladesh to accelerate sustainability. The first is the Circular Fashion Partnership, and this is being led by the Global Fashion Agenda based in Copenhagen. Also, partners include the Bangladesh Manufacturers and Garment Manufacturers and Exporters Association, also Reverse, which is a private sector entity. The goal of this partnership in Bangladesh is to promote the collection and sorting of textile scrap waste. So in the production of ready-made garments, up to 50% of fabric scraps are lost. And this partnership is really pushing for the collection, sorting of them, then having them recycled into fibers and ultimately used in new clothing. And in order to make this move forward, you really need this coalition, a global coalition of many different players. So the partnership has mobilized brands. They have over 10 global brands now that have committed to the partnership, have committed to sustainable principles. And in fact, you'll hear from one of the leading brands, OVS, next on the panel about the work that they're doing. You need the brands to then be pushing and working in partnership with their manufacturers and their supply chain to promote the collection and sorting of the textile waste, and then working with recyclers to actually create the fibers. And this partnership is showing how this type of new business model can lead to new green growth in Bangladesh in this case, but you really need the push and the pull of the brands. And in this case, Bangladesh exports much of its textile waste to India. There they have recyclers who then will recycle the fibers, and then Bangladesh manufacturers have to import the fibers and the textiles that have, up to 30% recycling fibers in them. But as consumers demand more sustainability, as brands commit to greater sustainability, we see that there's huge growth opportunities in the recycling market. And so why not have that growth occur in Bangladesh? And there's, as you can see on the slide, extensive number of recyclers that are very interested in investing in recycling plants in Bangladesh. So this would be just one of the examples of where we see their win-win opportunities to promote both greater sustainability and economic growth. The second partnership that I wanted to highlight, which P4G is supporting, is the Sustainable Future for Textile Factories. And PACT and IFC is part of this partnership in Bangladesh. And so this partnership really is focused on how to increase water use efficiency and reduce untreated wastewater in the process of dyeing and printing textiles. And so here again, no one actor can do it alone. So this partnership involves the local water authority, financiers in the PAC program and IFC, brands, manufacturers, and it also is targeting small to medium-sized enterprises. There are over 5,000 small to medium-sized businesses in Bangladesh producing textiles. And so this is a program that is really trying to build the capacity of those small businesses to work in a more sustainable way. So those are just two concrete examples of the type of work that we're supporting, and also the opportunities that we see to move forward with both sustainability as well as development growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Leila. And just a reminder, and this is one of the conditions of doing things online. If we were all in an audience, I would just let you know that to hold your questions until after the speakers have had a chance to make their presentations. But we have a question and answer feature in the webinar. Please, if you are in the audience and have thoughts or questions, post them to the Q&A. You'll see that function on the bottom of your screen. And we will get to questions after the presentations. As Leila mentioned, we are now very pleased to be joined by Simone Colombo from OVS. He heads the corporate sustainability work at OVS, which is leading fashion retailer. And from his very distinguished biography, there's one key point I wanted to focus on, which is that throughout the years, Simone has worked with environmental and social compliance and moved from risk management approach to a strategic approach, integrating key sustainability indicators into OVS's business strategy, improving social, environmental impacts, and looking towards a regenerative business model. And this shift is a critical one happening in industry, moving from risk management to strategy, that this is really about the future of businesses. So Simone, I hand it to you.
Yes, thank you. I'm also sharing the screen. I will just, no, sorry, let me try again. Okay, now you should see my screen. Okay, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here and to explain what we're trying to do to move our company and to contribute to the shift of the entire industry towards a more sustainable business paradigm for fashion. I appreciated what described by Leila before me, because the Circular Fashion Partnership, I think, fully integrates the three keywords of today. So we need to think in a circular way within the fashion industry, because we are talking about fashion, of course, according to a new partnership approach, which is an equal partnership that we need to establish throughout our supply chain. We as a brand, I have to admit that in the past, we set a list of requirements towards our supply chain, to our suppliers, and very complicated in some cases. So, but now I think the situation is changing, because we are now aware that we need a more collaborative approach, a multi-stakeholder approach to all the sustainability challenges we are facing today. Of course, OVS is a brand, it's a fashion brand, so we are focused on raw materials at first, because you know that around 60% of the life cycle impacts of a fashion company comes from raw materials. And today we have 65% of our assortment made with more sustainable material. Our goal is to achieve at least 90% by 2025. And this can be done choosing more sustainable raw materials, such as certified cotton coming from organic sources or BCI cultivation, but also recycled content, which is probably the solution where we want to invest more to be more compliant with the circular approach we were discussing earlier. This approach allows us to save more than 30,000 tons of carbon dioxide since 2016, when we started this new approach, which in the past was just let's say, a reactive approach pulled by the consumer, for some consumers' demands. It was not a strategic alignment to our business development principles, but today it is one of the core principles on which we base our future development. Together with the raw materials, we have to consider the treatments as well, because you already mentioned, and also the climate ambassadors mentioned, that the 20% of the wastewater comes from our industry. And of course, the denim processing is one of the key causes, especially where we manufacture our jeans, which is mainly in Bangladesh in our case. We want to eliminate all the dangerous chemicals and to eliminate all the unnecessary water to treat denim by 2025. So today we have more than 30% of our denim collection made with the waterless process, but we want to shift to 100% by 2025. The third keyword was partnership. And of course, we are also a member of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition since 2017. Thanks to this initiative, we have now the tools to assess and to guide our suppliers in recognizing their impacts and to individuate the best way to improve their social and environmental KPIs. I can give you an example about what I'm talking about, partnership. When we started involving our supply chain in HIG platform, which is this huge tool to evaluate the sustainability impacts, we sent out some emails to all our partners requiring them to subscribe, to register onto the platform, because we need it. We need to evaluate the KPI, etc. And after 1 week, we had 5 suppliers registered onto the platform. So it was not so satisfying as a result. But then we tried a different approach, and we arranged some training session, dedicated training session in some hotels rooms, where we invited all our suppliers together with a selection of our business managers. And we tried to explain to them what's our sustainability vision and why we are asking them to share with us their performances in terms of sustainability. The week later, we had more than 90 suppliers only in Bangladesh subscribing to the platform and sharing their results with us. That was a huge results, just moving from a compliance requirement setting to a collaboration within a real partnership, I mean. Today, the 80% of our production volume is on HIG, and our goal is to have 100% of our supply chain by 2022. Then we are working on transparency. Of course, we want to be clear with our consumers. We need to engage them. And probably I will anticipate some questions from the audience, which is about what's the role of the brands in terms of circularity, because we don't have the whole manufacturing process, but our role is to engage our consumers, because consumers, yes, they always like the circular products, but they are not fully aware about why a circular product is important and why this should be valued more than the conventional one. So we started explaining to our consumers what's the real impact of each garment they buy, not only the more sustainable one, but all our product preferences are now scored with the circularity score and the carbon emission, the water consumption they have. Then, of course, we have the circular fashion partnership, which is an extremely important asset we have to focus on our main sourcing country. We want to leverage on this real partnership to engage our suppliers in a win-win solution, because it allows us to reduce our environmental impact, avoiding to produce new raw materials, recovering waste. As a collateral effect, we are also fighting against local corruption when we talk about the waste business, because when you work in a partnership like this one, also the suppliers have a new strength to oppose to probably to local communities that wants to collect the waste flows, but not with a good intention, let's say, okay, with a good purpose to make them as a new yarn, new materials. I'm done, thank you.
Thank you, Simone. That was terrific. And again, just a reminder to post questions in the Q&A. Our final appetizer, if you will, for this conversation before we get into it with each other is Shujaat Alavi, Director of the MEA region for Agriculture and Industrial Biosolutions at Novozymes. It's a fantastic company, which you will hear about in Shujaat's presentation. I find particularly interesting that he starts his journey here through the design perspective, having studied and completed a master's in textile fiber and polymer science from Clemson, and having 20 years in the textile industry, bringing that full circle. So Shujaat, it's your platform.
Thanks. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining in from. Seems that people are in there from all over the world. Thanks to all. I'm Shujaat. I'm with Novozymes, and since we are short of time, I'll jump straight into it somehow, if it works. Yeah, so I would like to take you through a very brief overview of who we are as Novozymes, our purpose, our strategy, how we are helping the fashion industry, what are we doing in terms of innovation, just a snapshot of that, how do we bring more sustainable solutions, make circular fashion more possible, enabling textile production to be more sustainable throughout the entire value chain. And of course, we want to work together to make the textile industry more sustainable overall. Our purpose, together we find biological answers for better lives in a growing world. If I was to summarize this very shortly, it's basically taking needs and opportunities and tying them up with biological solutions, in simple words. The strategy, Better Business with Biology, is built up on that. So if you take these biological solutions and you then are able to facilitate production, production of more from less, with less heat, less water, less chemical usage. This is how we are helping the technical or textile industries innovate, save resources, and reduce their environmental footprint. We do invest heavily on R&D. I think we are accounting for nearly 2/3 of the entire global investment in enzyme development, and that's approximately equal to 12 to 13% of our total revenue. Our aspiration from a textile industry perspective is to pave the way for sustainable economy, transform how industries create and improve materials, how they consume, how they recycle, how they handle waste, etc. Just to give an example at the bottom here, in just 2019, we were able to help the textile industry save 39 million gigajoules of energy, 83 million cubic meters of water, 2 million tons of chemicals, and 2.8 million tons of CO2. And I think, and I promise we didn't plan this together, but it seems like a common theme that partnership is the way to the future. And that's exactly what Novozymes is looking to do, right? Working together to create a huge impact in the textile industry, working with customers, distributors, business leaders, corporations, think tanks, etc. Too many to name. But we would like to use this opportunity to invite you to reach out to us, Tina Lip, our global marketing manager, or to me, and discuss how we can just do an ideation session, or how we can have a dialogue on what we could do together for the textile industry. So using that 3 minutes, I'll just take it very brief, and that's the end of my presentation. I guess we'll have time in the panel discussion to have more dialogue.
Yes, we will, and thank you all for your efforts to make concise what is incredibly complex, and that's much appreciated. So I'd like to begin our conversation before we go to questions from the audience with perhaps the obvious question, but maybe complicated a little bit, which is that we are all here remotely because we're still in the middle of a pandemic, or as I said at the beginning, hopefully seeing the beginning of the end of the pandemic. But I would like to ask how COVID-19 has impacted access to finance, and how you are thinking about responses to that. And what I would just add to that question is that something like $40 billion of lost revenue from canceled orders to workers already exists on the deficit side of this pandemic. So it's not just a question of access to finance, but there is a social justice question embedded in how we come out the other end. And so thinking of these questions of workers and of companies and the collaboration between those, I wonder, Tuyen, Leila, others, how you're seeing this challenge.
So maybe I can start. Thank you very much, Joe. So obviously, COVID has been devastating. I think for the ready-made garment sector, 2020 was a big downfall. Maybe just to, there are some green shoots we see in our markets, Vietnam, Bangladesh, already in the last couple of months, there's a good rebound. Obviously, one of the big, there's a capital expense financing. A lot of the implementation on rooftop solar, more efficient equipment and all that have been postponed. And so hopefully with the rebound, those can take place again. But I think more importantly, the whole supply chain financing, where buyers, because they have a 60-day, 90-day before they pay, there needs to be a lot more solution where intermediaries can step in, take the receivables or take the risk post-shipment, even pre-shipment, to then finance the factories so then they can have the working capital. So one of the projects one of the facility we have is the Global Trade Supplier Finance. And surprisingly, the uptick, the usage of that has boosted into 2020 because a lot of the brand buyers had to maybe postpone payment terms, lengthen payment terms. And so having a facility in the middle where you can take these longer risks based on a brand like Nike or Puma or Levi's, but then quickly give the factories working capital so then they can continue to buy materials and most importantly pay their workers, that keeps the system going. So I think this is quite critical, this role of supplier finance. And maybe the last point I'll make is that the product has always have a sustainability linked pricing. So the better rated the environment and social rating of a factory, the lower the cost of this pricing for the supplier finance. So this hopefully can become more of a convention where a lot of financing can be linked to carbon footprint, to improvement in environment and social standards, and then using a good methodology to quantify that. I think this can then bring that partnership between financing and factories and brands closer together with sustainability. Thanks.
And just as a follow-up, and then Leila, I'm assuming you're seeing this in part as a result of access to capital due to historically low interest rates. That you're able to find this middle ground. Is that the case, or are you not seeing this as a unique opportunity for capital investment at this time?
Sorry, was that a question for me or for Leila?
It was a question back to you, and I know Leila is unmuted and ready to go. So you. Yeah.
So look, I think the interest rate environment in a way is decoupled because a lot of the factories are in the emerging markets, right? And that's mostly about the operating risks, the governance risks. I mean, obviously, within Southeast Asia, one of the big issue we've seen right now is, in Myanmar. So a market like that can open and shut overnight. And, that brings a lot of worry in terms of the old way of doing things. So for markets to work well, it's not just about interest rate being set at the central bank in the Europe or US level. I think it's the operating level in terms of governance, in terms of stability, infrastructure, domestic financing. So all the pieces have to come together. But I think there's a lot of good examples that we see in Asia. Obviously, Vietnam, has grown tremendously, and especially now linking more to FDI and more to free trade that is actually linked to climate conditions. I hope those type of free trade access linked to climate conditions is also a market pool for some of these countries to maintain the path toward greener investments and greener production.
Leila?
Just a comment about sort of all the canceled orders and how can the Build Back Better conversation contribute to not just sustainability, but also economic resilience. And I love the example that Simone mentioned in his presentation about how, as he was trying to bring on board the manufacturers to to report on their KPIs for sustainability, a simple email could not get the job done. It required sort of the development of the relationship building and the personal outreach. And you think that, that's core to what P4G is about, is that to really get things done, you need to create these true partnerships, not, just sort of logos on a slide and then you're sending out emails, but working in true partnership. And if you can build that on the sustainability side, that also has impacts in terms of, broader shocks to the supply chain. And, one example is we have worked very closely with a strong advocate in Bangladesh on sustainability. He owns a denim manufacturing factory with 2,000 workers. He continued to pay his employees out of his own savings during this time, as he faced all of these canceled orders. Ultimately, the Bangladesh government has a program to support the manufacturers. And so he has been able to get some reimbursement through that means. But we all know that countries are working together. There's a lot of donor aid programs. There's a lot of foreign assistance programs. And so again, this idea of creating this more resilient ecosystem that handles and focuses not just on environmental sustainability, but ultimately greater economic resilience, it is also a very important outcome of working in partnership.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Leila, and I think you can't really, I think we know we can't decouple the questions of a green transition from a just transition if we expect it to be to achieve the objectives. But it's a really good segue to Simone. It's something that you mentioned around partnerships, true partnerships, as you called them. And we can say that the fashion industry is historically competitive, to say the least. And yet partnership emerges at this moment in lots of ways as critical to the future of the industry. And you talked about a move from compliance to consumer, which I really thought is a beautiful kind of partnership as well. And I wonder if you could perhaps in this moment speak a little bit more about that circular relationship of partnership in addition to the ones that have been mentioned already that are kind of industry-wide.
Yes, of course. When we talk about our supply chain, we always forget about consumers. They are the final chain of our value chain, and they can do and they have to do something. They have to be engaged by us, of course. So I think that we have a big responsibilities in one way to pull a reaction from our supply chain to to be more proactive in researching new technologies, new materials, etc. On the other hand, we need to work with our consumers in order to make them aware that fashion can be manufactured from another garment. Okay, so a garment can come from another garment. This is quite easy when we talk about glass bottles, probably, or aluminum cans or whatever. Not for a T-shirt today, not for a pair of trousers. If we look, at least if we look to the mass market of users of fashion, they are not habits to this type of concept of fashion. You know, we ran some focus group in the last fall winter when we, no, two winters ago, when we launched our first collection of recycled polyester polar fleece. The result was not good at all, because all our consumers responded to our questions saying, I don't want to wear garbage. Okay. But the problem is the perception of the consumer, because if you don't wear garbage, you are wearing a barrel of oil. So which one is cleaner? Probably, if you think about a transparent plastic bottle, you can feel immediately that that is the better product, cleaner, with a more technology approach behind the product itself, instead of an old-fashioned, old-style manufacturing process based on fossil fuels. So we need to work more consumers. They need to be aware, and we are also trying to engage them in collecting used garments in order to allow for a proper recycle. Today we are lacking of scalable technology for fully recycle the post-consumer recycled waste, post-consumer waste, of course, at least when we talk about garments. But technology is always accelerating day by day. So I'm confident that we'll find a viable solution in the next months, not in the next years. We need to be ready. So we need to have a model which is ready to collect from our consumers and to address all these garments flows to the proper recycling system, and to think about our collection with a big anticipation, because we know what we can collect, so we can anticipate the future trends in terms of materials, in terms of colors, in terms of new product concepts.
So I think you may have hit the quote of the day. If you're not wearing garbage, you're wearing a barrel of oil. That may be the comment we come back to at the end. But I do think that perception of where do things come from? We're so detached. Society, consumers are so detached from the products of everyday life, which is one of the things that enables the extractive economy to function in the way that it does. So there's a huge project in educating the consumer, which you're taking on, which is exceptional. And I think you partially answered one of the questions already in the chat, which has to do with in what ways do you begin to see interrupting the supply chain to introduce the return of garments or textiles and their reuse. And I think you were alluding to that already. So unless you have something specific to say about that, I have a question for Shujaat.
No, I can add only another thoughts about this. Of course, we can do something from ourselves instead of waiting for a consumer reaction. So we can simplify our textile compositions. So we need to be more, we need to have a more creative approach in order to make today garments which are consistent to the current recycling technology. It's not easy, because we do, what we make is an emotional good. So it's not made on the basis of a need anymore, unfortunately, or at least not only for a need, but for an emotion. So you want to find the right feel, the right style in a garment. So you need to satisfy that need from the consumer. Not always you can do it being consistent to the end of life possibilities you have today. But we need to start working with the end in mind. So trying to find the right solution in terms of styles and feeling, but remaining consistent to what we can do at the end of life of the garment, keeping composition simple, less accessories, or at least a garment made for disassembly where possible. Of course, it's not always possible, but let's try step by step. You can't win a chess match with one single move. You need to create a strategy, and you need a lot of moves to do the chessmate.
So I'm going to pick up on design for disassembly and bring that over to Shujaat and ask you to speak for all of science and all of technology in a very short period of time. But yeah, no burden. But it also gets at one of the questions that I'm trying to start to weave in from the Q&A, which is sort of challenging the notion of circularity through a kind of recognition that the second law of thermodynamics still exists. we talk about circularity, but the truth is that what we make will always have these impacts and entropy impacts in particular. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And while of course, if you look at circularity from a Novozymes perspective, and we say, for us, 3 pillars ring true, and one of them is the possibility to use enzymes or biological solutions to reprocess pre-owned garments to make them probably more purposeful or useful again for some other purpose. But the other important pillar that holds true for us is what probably Simone was also referring to, right? So reduction by design. And we look at working together with partners and producing a product that uses much less. For example, we had a concept called geo-towel, right? So we took raw towels and we processed them completely without any harsh chemicals or any synthetic chemicals, even without dyes, and made them ready to be used by a consumer. And those are the kind of solutions that are allowing us to, reduce significantly the amount of impact during the process. So of course, there's one part is at the end of it where you can recycle and reuse, but during process, how could you reduce? I heard Leila in her talk mention about the things in Bangladesh around wastewater treatment, for example. And here we could refer back to the fact that if you change your process slightly or modify it, you could actually reduce the BOD and the COD load on the wastewater. Instead of having to do a heavy treatment, you could change in the process, right? And that's the second pillar. Of course, there's a third pillar from a circularity, which is around sustainable processing overall, using less water, less electricity, less steam. But also, when you use biological solutions, you could create a much more safer working environment for the people in the mills and the factories as well. So these 3 important pillars from our perspective.
Leila, did you want to pick up on that?
Only to say that I think that there's lots of opportunities, and it's really terrific to see sort of the innovation. And that's why we feel like the involvement of the private sector is so important, because there's always innovation going on. And that is where you can start to find the opportunities for how do you increase sustainability without putting in place what some people may view as a burden. Instead, you view it as an opportunity for greater efficiency.
Yeah. I mean, I'm following the questions in the chat and or in the Q&A, and I know we're coming close to the end of our time here, but what's interesting, our audience is starting to heat up on all of this and recognizing it's a little bit of a self-selection of who comes to an event, right? And they're asking questions about the complexity, basically, of these solutions, recognizing that they are partial and they're moving industries forward. And so I wonder if in just this last minute or so, if there are any final comments from the 4 of you, just about that process of saying, we know we're not coming up with perfect solutions, but how do we not have the perfect be the enemy of the good in this initiative? particularly in the finance space?
Yeah, maybe I'll. I think my focus is that, you know, as I see, we believe that, you know, good markets, sustainable markets drive big changes, right? Ultimately, not government policy. And so in this space, I really strongly believe this, one of the biggest drivers is on the demand side. And sometimes the consumer drives that, but sometimes the brands can drive that also in terms of just setting science-based targets on quantity of recycle that they need. I see a great example coming out of the FMCG space on recycled plastic, where today, you know, the big multinationals are actually setting quantifiable targets for percentage of recycle in any new packaging. And that's driving a new recycling industry that is decoupled from virgin plastic based on oil pricing. So this is something that I think brands can really step up in the garment industry to really set quantifiable targets and price in the sustainability premium. I think consumer, you know, the sentiment is there, and then they you know, can be driven by that. So that for me, the market dynamic of brand setting commitments is quite important to drive this. Thanks.
Shujaat?
Yeah, can I make a quick comment to that? I think that's a fantastic starting to where I was going to go as well. If you look at sustainability, it's very important. But when we look at a lot of the mills that are operating in this part of the world, emerging markets, they are driven in their decisions by parameters. What I mean is, if most brands will ask for a pill rate, so how fuzzy is the surface of the t-shirt or the shirt, right? They didn't necessarily ask about the process that we use to get to that pill rate. And if that change in that shift can happen, so the brands now ask for restricted substance list, RSL lists. In addition to that, if they can start asking about what process were you using, are you using the most sustainable process, then we can really get to a sustainable textile industry. And we've run these surveys in Europe, for example, where we talk to consumers, and 90% of all people surveyed, they said they would actually be willing to pay 10% more for a t-shirt that's biopolished, just to give an example. Right?
So I'm afraid that I have to be the responsible moderator and draw us to a close here. We're actually a minute or two over time. So let me just first of all begin by saying we have only scratched the surface of this incredibly complex issue, but it is really heartening to see the deep work happening in each of the organizations that you represent. And we could have filled many hours with just discussing what you're each doing. And I think key issues of collaboration and partnership have emerged in today's conversation. They reinforce the idea that shared knowledge and best practice is a way forward. And P4G is leading in those areas as well as many others, but really brilliant work. And I thank you for that. And it's fantastic to see the kind of consumer focus both that OVS is bringing to this, and Shujaat, your point of intersecting that, your final point, intersecting those process questions with what people know, what brands can do and what they know, I think is critical to making sustainable change here. And that this is a business question fundamentally as well. That the future of the viability of these industries is predicated on getting this answer right, and it is connected to the social justice questions just as much as it is to the environmental justice and sustainability questions. And I think that's what we're hearing from everyone. And so it's my great pleasure to thank you all. I want to end where we began with thanking the Consulate General of Denmark in New York, and in particular Ambassador Basse for initiating the outreach to us at Parsons and at the Tishman Environment Design Center to be able to partner with you and P4G on this event. We were very pleased to do so. I believe that Ambassador Christensen had to depart for yet another meeting. I think being the climate ambassador probably means moving from constant meeting to constant meeting. And so we thank him as well for joining us. And we wish everyone a healthy and safe day. Thank you very much for being here today.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joe.
Thank you all.